Raised by wolves with canine DNA in his blood, having trained more than 24,000 vets, helping you and your fur babies thrive. Live in studio with Will Bangura, answering your pet behavior and training questions. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host and favorite pet behavior expert, Will Bangura.
Would you like to go on?
Y'all ready for this?
So glad to have with us a very special guest. Lara Joseph is the owner of Animal Behavior Center. It's a international education center that teaches people to understand behavior through animal training using the principles of applied behavior analysis. She's a professional animal behavior consultant and trainer with a focus on undomesticated and exotic animals. Laura travels internationally, giving workshops and lectures and providing online live streaming learning programs on behavior, training, and enrichment. She sits on the advisory board for All Species Consulting, the Indonesian Parrot Project, and past board member of Nature's Nursery, a wildlife rehabilitation center in Ohio. She is the president of the nonprofit Sam I Can Foundation, raising awareness for exotic animals and animal organizations in need. She's a professional member of IAATE and ZAA. She has been asked to co-author and is currently working on an international manual of animal behavior and training. She's a guest lecturer in the zoo biology, behavior, and diagnostics taught by Dr. Jason Crean at St. Xavier University, Chicago. Laura has presented for a wide variety of organizations, including the Philadelphia Zoo, the Ohio State University Behavior Club and Exotic Veterinary Club, the Michigan State University's Animal Behavior Club, the University of Wisconsin Division of Exotics and Wildlife Medicine, the Association of Avian Veterinarians, Best Friends Animal Society, the Pet Professional Guild, the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Conference, the Autism Model School, and the Wheaton College Division of Applied Behavior Analysis. Well, Lara, thank you so much for being here. That is very impressive, to say the least.
Hey, thanks. I guess I need to trim that down a little bit.
Well, you know, what that actually shows is that you've got a lot of wisdom, because obviously anybody that has that long of a bio has been doing this in one way, shape, or form for quite a while.
Yes, for quite a while.
So I always like to ask this question. I'm sure you've been asked this many times before. What even started to get you interested in doing anything in the training and behavior field with animals?
Okay, I'll keep this as short as possible.
As
I
long as
got
it-
it. I ended up interacting with an animal I knew nothing about, and a species of animal I knew nothing about. And I don't have, before then, I didn't have a history of really working with animals. I just had, my dogs at home, and that was pretty much it. I ended up getting a parrot, not knowing what I was getting into. And when I did the research after I got the parrot, I ended up finding out it was one of the most complex species of parrots to work with. I didn't realize how smart they were. And, but then I ended up adopting a parrot, and it was it was advised he be professionally euthanized due to his aggression. At that time, the parrot was 8 years old, and I knew enough to look at the bird and say, these are learned behaviors. These are not behaviors that the bird was born or hatched knowing. So I ended up going for that bird. I ended up going back to school, taking master level classes in applied behavior analysis just to learn how to change his behavior. And then I just became an advocate for him because I knew he was going to be euthanized. And I was considering it because it was professionally advised. That is how I got started in this. And I'm here to tell you that bird is getting ready to turn 30 years old. And he is such an awesome educator.
Wow.
He's probably one of our sweetest ambassadors that we have now. All
So,
just from knowing and doing better.
so let me get this straight. You had no formal education and no real experience training any kind of animal,
No,
really.
no,
And you decide, I'm going to get a bird.
yeah,
And you end up with this parrot, not just any parrot, but from what I'm understanding, one of the most complex types of parrot. Is that correct?
yes,
And
yes,
you get this bird, this parrot, and it's got aggression problems right from the get-go. You acquire this bird, it comes to you with these aggression issues, and it's been suggested that the bird be euthanized.
correct. Yeah.
And
So
and
I
so
complicated the hell out of my life.
yeah, but you know what? It's amazing, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I think we ended up connecting on Facebook, probably intersected in a way because we believe in force-free training.
Yes.
And, I deal with dogs. I don't deal with other species. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was a little bit selfish, okay? Because you can't just strap a shock collar on a parrot. You can't just strap a shock collar on a bunch of other species. And these animals, not just dogs, because it's inherent across the entire animal kingdom, including us. We can have emotional dysregulation. We can be aggressive. We can be fearful, and everything in between. But what I didn't know, I knew that you worked with different species, but what I didn't know was this is how you got your start. And that's
Yeah.
what, and so now I'm even more fascinated. So tell me the story. You get this bird, you decide, how is it that you go from, all right, I have this aggressive parent, I'm going to go back to school, I'm going to get my master's in applied behavior analysis. Talk to me about how that journey happened.
Um,
How did those
well,
dots get connected? I mean, obviously, yeah, you wanted to help the parent, but that's a big commitment.
yeah. Yeah. Well, at the time, now this was over 20 years ago. The first thing I did, talk about changing of the times, I was looking for books. I was looking for books to read to better understand parrot behavior. Um, there were some out there, and I didn't know the authors. So I started picking up and reading them. And as I was reading them, um, um, some of it was just like, what's this person's history and education? Because this sounds like a lot of this is what I think is going on versus what is actually happening. There wasn't a lot of science in what I was reading. I wanted the proof, I wanted the facts, I wanted the statistics because this bird's life was on the line. I didn't have time for people to tell me what they thought was going on in this bird's life. So I ended up getting online and searching for it. I was desperate. I was petrified of this bird. Um, he's a big bird. And I ended up traveling and going to different conferences, taking workshops, and through that, I started hearing about the world of applied behavior analysis. I had no clue what it was. And just to clarify, I don't have my master's in applied behavior analysis. I've taken master level courses.
Gotcha.
So I just don't want to misrepresent myself. And that's how I started learning about different people that had parrots, different professionals. Well, I wasn't a professional at the time. I was like, oh, there are people out here that really the parrot, focus on parrots. And that's when I started learning about applied behavior analysis. And I don't know which one was my real true love, parrots or applied behavior analysis, because I became really fascinated with this field of science. And then I just started blogging. I had zero audience, and I started blogging about my work with this bird whose name is Rocky, and showing photos and videos of my work with him, bringing in my education, what I was learning at the same time with applied behavior analysis. Then I started volunteering at Nature's Nursery, the wildlife rehabilitation center, and I started working with all their raptors. So I was working with their owls, their hawks, their falcons, their turkey vulture, and I was applying intermittent schedules of reinforcement. I was everything I was using, and I was like, wow, this stuff really works. I like it. And it was through my blogging that I started getting the audience. And then people started learning of Rocky's story. People started reaching out to me, asking me to present, to speak. And I was like, I'm not a public speaker. I just sit home with my birds. I was really nervous getting up and speaking, but the reinforcer behind my behavior of doing that was Rocky's story and trying. It was so important. I wanted it to get out there for other people who were in the same situation, or even I didn't care if it was dogs, horses, alligators. I didn't care. Um, because euthanization was the answer given to me, and thank God I didn't take that advice. So then I was just like, that's when well, years later, I started the Animal Behavior Center, and I started it. I could have easily called it the Avian Behavior Center, but I was like, why limit this to just birds? I've always been interested in animals, specifically exotic animals. And then once I started getting into this professionally, I was like, I could venture down that road of dog training. And then I started getting in touch with a lot of different professional dog trainers, and they started telling me their history of, the controversy in the field of dog training. So that's when I was like, I'm going to stick with exotics. It's what I'm passionate about,
Yeah.
and I can help represent the science behind the behavior in what professional dog trainers are doing to help to back them up and say, you cannot put a shock collar on a bird. Well, you can. Um, how are you going to train this alligator with a shock collar? How are you going to train this gorilla with a shock collar? This giraffe, you're going to die, is what's going to happen.
Mm.
So I thought there was a very powerful, important message there. And I love it. I love it. I see a lot of the controversy on social media. I was not privy to it. But through some of my friends that are professional dog trainers, I'm like, why is this controversy even there? The science speaks for itself. Um, I've never really gotten involved in that controversy, but yeah, spend a day with me and I'll show you there's better ways to do this, and there's numerous reasons why you don't.
Yeah, exactly. We in the dog training world, when we're talking about debating the use of force versus force free, my first go to, and I used to be a trainer that used force. I used to be a trainer that used shock collars, used prong collars, and thought, hey, that was the way to do it. And that's the way it had to be. A lot of that was tradition. And expediency to get there quickly. But what I love with what you do, like you said, if you tried that stuff on a lot of these exotic animals that you work with, you'd be dead.
Yeah,
And yet you have to be able to interact with them. You have to be able to feed them. You have to be able to do husbandry on them. You have to be able to do all kinds of things with them. And yet, with this across the board multi species experience that you have, you've not had to use force, I'm guessing, other than maybe if there was an emergency.
exactly. I don't want to use force. I know the side effects of using force. I know the side effects. If I guess the real question that when I see people using force, the first thing that comes into my mind is I watch them and I say, why are you in this? Why do you want to do this? Um, and if I use force, it is because the consequence of not using it at that time is worse, such as two animals are coming together, something's gonna die. Yes, I will grab a net. Yes, I will grab a towel. But I always say, note to self, this needs training. Do not do this again. And I have found myself in several situations. A lot of the animals I work with are in enclosures for their safety, for other animals' safety, for people's safety, no matter what the animal's background. I am just here to empower the animal. I want to empower that animal, and I want if the caretaker, the zookeeper, the trainer, the caregiver is willing to put in the work, I'm willing to give you my all as well. I love seeing animals thriving. With a lot of the species of the animals that I work with, I would say one of the hardest. I get asked this question of all the species you work with, what's the hardest animal you've ever had to train? And it kind of, people expect me to come back with the species, and I can't tell you. But I can tell you the individual that's the hardest to teach new behaviors, counter condition fear, that is the animal that has been raised with little to no enrichment because are they're very fearful of novel stimuli because they're not used to having changing enrichment environment. So they don't cope well with change, even the smallest thing. So I will start working on shaping, desensitizing, counter conditioning, teaching new behaviors, and I train. How I got into training is because studies show that if you're actually using positive reinforcement training, it's the animal's preferred form of enrichment. I know that for a fact. because I see it every single day. But I can't always be training that particular animal. So that's when in different types of enrichment come into play, and to redirect behavior, redirect focus on me. Um, but I want to see those animals thriving. I want to see them, and I want to see their lives empowered to the maximum.
So
I
you
mean,
brought, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say a lot of the animals I work with are in enclosures for whatever reason. Um, they don't have as many choices as animals that don't live in enclosures. So I want to provide those enclosures with three things: choice, control, and complexities, because all three of those have a major impact on um, behavior.
Talk to me more about those three: choice, control, and complexities. And if you can, maybe weave in some cases that kind of represent that.
Sure. Um, I entered this field through enrichment, um, changing my birds' cages and providing enrichment, seeing them manipulate it, how they would look at it, and you could see them thinking, and it was so fascinating to me. You could see them thinking and just looking at that object and processing how they were going to manipulate this object to get a different outcome than the last time they manipulated it. Um, so then I started digging deep into research articles on enrichment and behaviors. I was and still am really interested in abnormal repetitive behaviors, how they develop, like stereotypical
Yeah.
behaviors, how they develop, why they develop. They're usually a coping mechanism, coping with the inability of not being able to make certain choices they want to make because they're restricted due to their enclosures. So then I'm like, all right, if you can't come out of this enclosure, and oftentimes the animals that I'm working with, I don't have that choice, whether they stay in or come out. I am there just to, this is your future. I am here to try to make it the best it can be. So I incorporate choice control and complexities into the animal's environment, through enrichment, through me, my training. And so I try to incorporate things into their environment that give them more a sense and feel of control over their environment. Um, I was just thinking of, I was working with these three lemurs, ring-tailed lemurs, and I had worked with them for a long time. And I wanted these lemurs to control the people looking at them. So I started teaching them the difference between two colors, and um, teaching them to touch these colors and have the people um, raise certain colors. The lemurs go and touch those colors, or the lemur touches a color, has the people show the color back to the lemurs. It was just a way to give them more sense of control over their environment. And when the people see these animals interacting, especially these children, you can see their minds just starting to, this may be the first time they've ever seen a ring-tailed lemur. And I don't know what that child's future is going to be, but maybe what them watching me interacting with these lemurs is their spark to be the next scientist in conservation. But studies also show, back to the three C's, studies also show with predictability comes boredom. I always say boredom does have its place, or predictability does have its place, especially working with severely fearful animals. I want to be as predictable as possible in the beginning. Um, so just, sorry, I'm like the three C's: choice, control, and complexities. I'm constantly trying to change enrichment, change the training that I do. I don't want to train the same old thing, teach. I want to constantly teach something new, especially with an animal that's used to this type of interaction. I don't, I will mix in cueing behaviors it already knows into teaching new behaviors because that is a form of enrichment for that animal. Learning something new, keeping their mind going, figuring things out, knowing that they have the power to manipulate their environment to get desired outcomes or the outcomes that they know that I'm going to give. And another really cool thing is, and you probably, I'm sure you know this, working when I'm working with extremely fearful animals in the beginning, with a lot of the animals that I'm working with, um, this animal has no use for me. It doesn't want this proximity with me, has no use for me. Once I start training this animal, teaching this animal, and this animal is training me too, I'm learning from this animal. What I find out, what almost all the time, not always, is that the opportunity to be near me, be with me, soon becomes the reinforcer.
You know, there's a lot always talked about these days, it seems, about enrichment. Um, but oftentimes, nobody's talking about, well, what was the problem that we're bringing enrichment into? And how does enrichment create a change? And what's that change? Can you give some examples of that? Because I think sometimes, we talk about enrichment and we forget about, what's really happening here for the animals.
Well, and it's funny you bring this up because I was just thinking about this morning. Um, and I don't know if it's just in the zoo community, but this new term, or it's new to me hearing, is starting to float around called behavioral enrichment. And I'm like, what is behavioral enrichment? Isn't all enrichment behavioral? Because if it's not, um, if the animal's not interacting with it, the interaction is a behavior. And if they're not interacting with it, it's not enrichment. So what does behavioral enrichment really mean? um, so I have so many examples of enrichment and changing. I use enrichment, especially foraging. Foraging is a part of all of my behavior modification plans with any species of animal. Um, so with Rocky, when I first adopted him, um, he knew how to do four things very well. That was eat, sleep, drink, and poop. Um, and scream. He would scream once every 3 seconds for hours on end. And if you've ever, he's a Moluccan cockatoo. If you've ever heard that scream, it is very hard to deal with. And he's in my house screaming for hours. All peace I have had, gone.
Wow.
Bye. um, so I started teaching him to forage for his food because in order to change a behavior, you need to replace it with another. So I was like, okay, and I needed to start shaping a new behavior. Well, I knew he knew how to eat, sleep, drink, and poop and scream. So there's 5 behaviors. Um, I need to start somewhere. So I started with his behavior of eating. He already knows how to eat. So let's start shaping complexity in the behavior of him eating. And applied behavior analysis, I use it in designing enrichment all the time. All of my enrichment involves using the science of behavior. There's shaping, there's desensitizing if the animal is nervous or fearful. If they're foraging, oh, sister. Sorry, I thought I have that on Do Not Disturb. Um, Intermittent schedules of reinforcement. Foraging involves intermittent schedules of reinforcement. It involves ratio strain. If the foraging device is too complex for that individual animal, you're going to actually positively punish the very behavior you're trying to teach and reinforce. That's by increasing the complexity level too fast. So when I started teaching him to forage for his food, I could use that to give him other things to focus on besides where in the house I was. Because when I went out of his line of sight, the screaming would start. And before I started learning about applied behavior analysis, this is so frustrating to somebody who all I was trying to do was I didn't want this animal to be euthanized, but I didn't have the power that education provides to know how to do better. That's when I started taking the master level courses in applied behavior analysis. But then I started teaching him how to forage, shaping complexity. And with complexity comes duration, the length of time at which this behavior exists. Because the longer period of time he's interacting in eating food from a particular toy, the more he's not screaming. So it's been 21 years since I adopted him. But being new to that, and I will say I was desperate. I was desperate. I need help now because this animal is going to be euthanized. And I almost did it because I didn't know any better. So that's foraging. It's a great replacement behavior. It's also a great way to redirect the end of a training session because if studies show if that positive reinforcement training is the animal's preferred form of enrichment, why would they want it to stop? You know, reinforcers are consistently changing. So with some of the animals that I work with, when you gave a cue that the training session was getting ready to end, it's not uncommon to see behaviors labeled as aggressive start to happen because they don't want it to stop. So that's when I start using like the four main factors of reinforcer effectiveness. One is deprivation, and that does not mean depriving the animal of food. It means the longer the animal or any of us are deprived of a highly valued reinforcer, the more desirable it becomes. So when I need to when I know a training session's getting ready to end, instead of cueing the animal that I'm going to end the training session, and this can be controversial too, because I go through it in my own head, I redirect. I redirect the animal, boom, here's something in a foraging toy that's going to occupy your attention while I walk away. So some people will say, well, isn't that the cue that the training session is over? And you know what my response is? I really don't care. I don't care if that's the cue for the end of the training session because what I want is the behavior I just saw. The animal looking very contently his behavior being redirected to something else, now engaging with that object instead of being stressed with the sight of watching me walk away.
You know, when we're talking about enrichment, and I'm thinking about some of the animals that you work with, because like you said, they're in enclosures and you don't have the luxury to let them get out and about and do things. And, a lot of, at least with dogs, there's a lot of behaviors that are rooted in boredom and anxiety and a lack of enrichment. And I'm wondering if you can give an example of a different species other than a dog, obviously, but specifically where there was a lack of enrichment, what kind of behavior problems, if there were present as a result of that? What kind of, if you then did intervene with enrichment, what kind of enrichment did you apply?
Incorporate.
Yep. And what did you integrate, and what was the outcome of doing that as far as changes?
Sure. I'm working with a particular species right now, but I'm not privy to talk. The animal is not under my care, so I'm not privy to talk about it. But, and that's why I'm smiling, because I'm like, I'm working on this very behavior right now. But I'm always working on, or I'm always looking for an animal to work on with that behavior because I want to see that change. So a lot of animals I work with, not all of them, do have those abnormal repetitive behaviors. You'll see pacing, pacing around the enclosure. And if you look at the floor of that enclosure, especially if it's an outdoor exhibit, you can tell there's abnormal repetitive behavior happening. A lot of times with abnormal repetitive behaviors, it has such a long history of reinforcement, and you can tell usually not. I don't want to say the length of time that the animal that has been exhibiting that abnormal repetitive behavior, but some key things I look for is how well practiced this behavior is. And there's a particular lemur that's coming to mind because I do use it in some of my presentations where it's touching this side of the enclosure, jump, jump, touches the front bar, jump, touches the side bar, goes back, touches that front bar, 1, 2, jumps back to this one, the same two, touch the bar in front. And I watched it and I recorded it for like this animal doing this 15 minutes. And, it gives me a lot of anxiety watching an animal do that. But I'm collecting data. I'm observing I'm collecting baseline behavior before I start implementing. But when I saw, for this particular example, the lemur bounced off this wall, did those 2 steps, went to touch that front bar, but missed it, and went to carry on the abnormal repetitive behavior, but realized it missed that bar. So it hurried up, turned around, didn't touch it with its left hand, touched it with its right that it has been, then completed the sequence. When I see a type of interruption like that and the animals focus on completing that behavior, that's when I know this has been practiced for quite a while. So I don't want to incorporate, and we were just having this conversation last week, I don't want to incorporate an object to block that abnormal repetitive behavior because that can induce so much stress. I don't want to remove something from that enclosure that animal has had part of its repertoire for so long, because now it's just gone. And I'm sure if I could monitor heart rate, I would see different levels of stress due to the loss of that object in its environment. So what I'm going to do, and that just causes a behavioral shift because I've done it before. I've seen it. Well, I'm going to move this piece of enrichment so you can't complete that turning in that circle. Then you'll see stress. And with some of the animals I work with, not only will you see abnormal repetitive behaviors, but then it turns into self-injurious behaviors, such as primates doing the eye poking, birds plucking their feathers, and then it turns into, so now you've taken a behavior issue that's turning into a medical issue because now it's starting to self-mutilate. So now you have a behavior issue and a medical issue and a history of, now you just reinforced another very undesirable behavior. So what I'll start doing is incorporating change with everything in place. I'm going to let your abnormal repetitive behavior continue, but when you glance at me, boom, a Cheerio is going to fly into your enclosure. And then I'll know if that behavior, if that was a highly effective reinforcer, if I see the behavior happen again. Then I need to just start collecting those reinforcers, changing those behaviors. And a lot of times, I get people tell me, oh, you must be so patient. No, I'm not. I am not a patient person. The reinforcer behind what I do is I'm breaking down steps, as you know, so very small that when I see a slight change in behavior, that is the reinforcer. I'm on the right track. I saw that glance that you glanced at. I saw you glance at me. I'm seeing change. I'm starting to communicate through training with that animal. And first and foremost, I want the animal to be empowered. I don't want to see the stress. I don't want to see an animal forced to cope with its living conditions.
With your work, you do a lot of free shaping then?
Mm-hmm.
What percentage would you say of the training that you're doing is free shaping?
I don't even really know. Um, um, I don't know. I've never been asked that question before, and I'm trying to sit in here thinking of all the different animals that I've
The
worked
only
with.
reason why it came to my mind, and I'll tell you why, is
Yeah.
because we don't do enough of it. We don't do a lot of that in dog training. Maybe, I'm not saying everybody doesn't, okay? But it's so easy to work with a dog, I think, okay? Obviously, I've not worked with other species. I've worked with some cats, but not other species. So I don't know. But, I'm thinking, well, I don't know how I would do this or do this or do this or do this. I'm thinking as you're talking with other species, and then as you're talking about, breaking things down into very tiny little pieces. So I'm thinking, well, you must be doing a lot of free shaping.
I've never been asked that question, and now that you ask me, I think a lot of it is. You know?
Which is amazing because it's so powerful. I've watched some really skilled trainers that are really good with free shaping do things that I never believed could be done. Because in one respect, it seems so passive. But yet when you see someone who's really good at it and you see how the behavior changes, it's almost like magic.
Yeah, isn't it like I've always heard that training using positive reinforcement is a mix of art and science. And art is one thing that will bring me to tears. A beautiful piece of art. They're not tears of sadness. It's just like, oh my God, I've never seen anything so beautiful. And that's what I see when I see fabulous trainers empowering animals. It's hard for me not to get choked up because I just can't control my emotions, because when I see a trainer interacting and empowering animals, I don't think there's anything else out there more beautiful to me than to see that.
I was a balance trainer, compulsion based trainer, whatever you want to call it. When I first started, I was a kid. I was like 9 years old, and we trained dogs very forcefully back then. And my dad competed, but that was the way you did it. There was no positive
Yeah.
reinforcement. Everything was compulsion. Then I kind of moved into balanced, more. Yeah, I used punishment and negative reinforcement, but also, used positive reinforcement as well. And then crossed over to completely force free. And a few years back, I had hired a trainer that his background was he came out of the military. He was a retired combat veteran, military working dog handler, both for explosive detection devices and also protection apprehension. And everything was pretty compulsion based. That was his background. And
Yeah.
I, at that point, when I hired him on, almost all of my cases and the work I was doing was with dogs that were very aggressive and or very fearful. Okay. And we went out, I think it was one of the first times he went with me. We went out to a case and the dog had fear aggression and, you know, wanted its space, did not want you coming near it, didn't want to come near you. And as long as you allowed it to have its space, it wasn't aggressive. Okay. Well, the first thing I usually do is I come out and I do an initial assessment behavior consultation. It takes about 2 hours. And most of that, I'm getting information from the pet parent. I'm not interacting with the dog. So the dog's at a distance, quite a ways away. And during this 2 hours, okay, and I don't even know why I did it. It's just something that just happened automatically. While I'm talking to them, and the trainer that I hired is just observing what's going on. At that distance, I could toss a treat and the dog would take the treat. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I started tossing treats. So I started using a clicker, click and toss a treat, click and toss a treat. And all I did was take very super tiny successive approximations of this dog moving towards me. I mean, the tiniest little sliver. And rewarding that, reinforcing that. By the end of the 2 hours, the dog had laid down next to me and put its chin on my leg, which had never happened for this dog. And I've never done a free shaping exercise in my life other than that with this dog. And the reason I bring it up is because not only I think about how powerful that is, and I forget about it because I don't use it. You're talking about what you do with these exotic animals, and I see all this free shaping that you're talking about. And then I kind of compare that to the way I used to do things with force. And it's just sad when I think about the whole idea of forcing the dog into doing something and discounting how powerful reinforcement based training really is. And it just impresses me so much more when I think that most of the work that you're doing is a lot of free shaping. Because you're
Yeah.
also dealing, like you said, I mean, stereotypical behaviors, those are really difficult behaviors to modify.
Yeah, they are. They are. And sometimes I just I want to give that animal some relief. Um, and some of the animals I've worked with, you know, I'm getting ready to talk about counter conditioning as soon as we're done here. But some of the animals that I've worked with, Um, just seeing how empowered they are. Um, I don't, like I said, I don't want them to have to, they don't have a lot of choice in their lives, you know? The behavior you see is a result of the environment they're in. And a lot of times they're living alone, because they're they're going to kill whatever you put in that enclosure with it. So if I can interact with it through the cage bars, and even if I never touch that animal, that's not my goal, is to be able to touch, hug, and kiss it. My goal is to just make it live a better life, let it live a better life. And I think that no matter however, for whatever reason, these animals are in the situations that they're in, it is up to us to be responsible, to say back to them, to say thank you, and provide them that training and provide them that enrichment, medical care, nutritional care. I feel like I just got off track what we were talking about. Um,
Well, we were
but
talking about, you know, how shaping and you having to do a lot of free shaping is, at least I was talking about that, very powerful and isn't used enough. And in your case, that's what you're doing a lot of. And I think you were talking about, hey, this animal, its behaviors is a product of its environment. And if you put it's alone, and if you put another species in there, or one of the same species, it might get killed. And you're not able to necessarily touch in that
yeah,
way with the animal to provide that for them, but where the enrichment, is really improving their quality of their life and how they're benefiting from that.
yeah. Yeah, enrichment, definitely. And that's why, Will, that's how I became a trainer. Is the animals I could see from their responses to training. Wow, this is really enriching for you. I guess I better keep it going. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer, if you show an animal a way of life, it's our responsibility to make sure we keep that going. The last thing I want to do is show them something and let them experience it and them not be able to experience it again. To know what it's like to have that loss, you know. Very few instances I've seen animals are in those situations, but it can make, with the amount of species of animals I work with, uh, I'm working nonstop.
Mm.
So I am trying to, I'm at a point in my career and I'm on track. I knew right where I wanted to be at different points in my life, and I'm starting to make that shift, which is, I have animals here at my house that I take care of. They are my number one responsibility. They will always come first. And then I, every species of animal that I'm working with now is outside of my center, outside of, that way somebody else is taking care of it. I will move in and show your team how to train this animal, enrich shape complexity, and keep it going. And then I'll move on to the next team so that way I can reach even more people and more animals. And one thing else I wanted to say too, just to help back up the amazing work you're doing and all these dog trainers out there that are doing this work in the science of behavior. Um, if you think force and aversives are the only way you're going to get behavior, come train with me for a day and I'll show you. You I will always start training an animal. There's certain things I train it in the beginning, things like I have to, like their weight training, to make sure they're staying healthy. But the next series of behaviors I start moving into is a lot of target training, whether it's touching my hand, touching an object in its enclosure, because I start planning for an accident. Because a lot of these animals I'm training can do, they can kill you in a heartbeat. So I start planning or training a backup. I want you to target your butt cheeks to the corner. I will train that behavior. You will earn reinforcement when you give me that behavior. And I do that to create distance between me and the animal in case you ever find yourself in a situation where a cage falls apart, a door is left accidentally open, because nobody plans an accident. And I have found myself in situations where I am face to face with this animal. No bars between us. I have found myself in that situation a few different times, and I'm like, thank God I trained this animal the way I did. Because now, if I didn't, if the animal sees, oh, there's no cage bars between us, now I get to show you, you know, um, I found myself in several situations where I'm like, that is a testament to this type of work. Because I pulled out the target stick. I need you to touch. Good. Can you touch over here? Good. How about behind this door? Fabulous.
Yeah. Talk to me. I want to circle back to Rocky.
Okay.
Um, and then I want to talk about ABA just a little bit, but talk to me because you said Rocky was aggressive. Talk to me from what observable behaviors was Rocky displaying that we would say were aggressive?
He would target his beak to any part of my flesh ending in blood. ABC.
Yeah.
Let's see. He would when he would come out of the cage, he would charge me. Um, he had um, he loved men. He loved my husband. My husband has since passed away. But when my husband and I were in the same room together, Rocky wanted me off the map. He wanted me out of the room. He would chase me. He chased me up the stairs. I locked myself in the shower one time. I jumped on the toilet. Just that he would chase me, and the end result would be him biting me, biting my feet, biting my hands while I was trying to protect myself, um, lunging at me through the cage bars really quickly, um, to the point where my family said they would no longer visit me because they didn't feel safe in my house. He's fully flighted. He's a 930-gram bird with the wingspan of probably, I don't know if you can see that, about that
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
So that's pretty scary coming at you in a house. Um, so when my husband would, I would do all this training with him throughout the day, and I was like, great, look at this. We can live in the same household. Then my husband would walk in. Rocky had no use for me anymore. So that's when I learned about using, okay, what's the reinforcer here? My husband's attention. So that's when I started really, I would have my husband hold the bird, and I would try to get like, I would get like a foot and a half away from my husband. Then would tell my husband, now tell him good and pet him. And then I'd walk away and I'd come back in. I'm like, okay, Freddie, now tell him good and pet him. But then I got to the point where I was able to pick Rocky up off of my husband, tell him what a good boy he was, give him back to my husband. Um, So and maybe it was such a huge learning curve for me because that's what I was doing. I was just learning, you know? Maybe that's why Rocky was one of the hardest cases I've ever worked with because he was my first one, you know? Um, so those are the behaviors labeled as aggressive. The running, the chasing me, the biting me, the lunging. Um, and I was just petrified of him. That's a big beak with a lot of crushing power.
Yeah. What is
Yeah.
the crushing power of a bird like that, if you
I
know?
don't know. I have
Okay.
to look back into
Yeah.
it because I could have swore, I think like an alligator's um, pounds per square inch is like 2,000. And I think Rocky is um, 300. I get it confused with a hyacinth macaw, which is the world's largest flighted parrot, species of parrot, has a beak pressure. I want to say it is 300 pounds per square inch.
That's I would not have expected it to be that high. That's amazing.
Yeah, I was surprised it wasn't higher than that.
Wow.
I was surprised. So I don't really know, but that will
Yeah.
give your listeners something to look up. Well, I'll tell you, it's strong enough to break a broom handle.
Wow.
So, I mean,
Unbelievable.
Rocky could easily break my pinky finger, easily.
Mm, wow.
So, and I hear a lot online, as I'm sure you do as well with dogs, but I see some of this stuff on social media and I was like, oh, please stop. This is horrible advice. And that is, you live with birds bite, just deal with it. No, they don't just bite. They bite out of fear. If it gets you to go away and you do, then you just reinforce the behavior. But by no means, if I've got a bird biting my hand, I'm going to shake my hand and get that bird off of me and try to figure out what the hell just happened? Why did this just happen? How do I prevent it from happening again? What did I do to make the bird feel it had to react that way? So birds don't just bite. Birds bite food, you know? Um, Same thing as alligators. Alligators don't just bite, you know? And the thing with alligators, this is how will these variety of species are such amazing educators because alligators look like this
Hmm.
when they're relaxed and sunning themselves, and alligators look like this when they're getting ready to attack you. So, which one is it? You know? And do you step in that enclosure or don't you? Do you know what you're looking at? Um, I've trained numerous different alligators, and I would tell you they are one of my favorite species to work with. Um,
What is
very
it
mis-
about the alligator that you like working with?
um, I think it's because they're very misunderstood by people. They're looked at as I'm sitting here staring at a picture off the side of my computer of me with an alligator. They're looked at as man-eating beasts, and they're not. Will they eat you? Yeah, if they're hungry enough, they will. I just kept my gators well fed. And to see, I liked blowing people's mind by saying, my alligators are crate trained. Watch this. My alligators can open their mouth on cue. They can step on a scale. They're target trained. Um, just to show people I like that type of training and communication with that animal because what I've seen is when people are watching, they have a newfound respect for the species. And it's a way for me to talk to you about how alligators see, how they hear, how they have integumentary sensory organs, which are little tiny freckles all over the base and the sides of their jaws. And that picks up on vibrations in the water. So that's how they know that you just fell in the lake.
Mm.
um, yeah, they're really cool, amazing species. as is any animal.
So, having worked for so many years with so many different variety of species, now, if we throw just the labels out with different species, what do you say, across the board, what do you say is the most misunderstood principle in how behavior works?
Ooh, the most misunderstood or misused?
The most misunderstood principle of how behavior works.
I don't know. Well, you're asking me some great questions. The most misunderstood principle. Um, like,
If you
uh,
and here maybe we're getting into the ABA thing, okay? And
okay,
for let's just start there, really. For those people that might be watching that don't know what applied behavior analysis is, how would you describe what it is in both the technical but also layman terms?
sure. And what I do, Will, is make ABA very easy to understand. So using applied behavior analysis is using environmental events to control behavior, um, such as the light coming in the door, the sound coming in from behind the animal. Um, I first observe the animal, watch how it interacts in its environment, what it's moving towards, what it's moving away. Then I collect the things that it moves towards, not all of them, but some of them, and put them in my pocket so I have something to you to be. Otherwise, I have no benefit to this animal unless I'm delivering reinforcers, the animal's reinforcers. So that's how I start shaping behavior, but that's what applied behavior analysis is. It's not all about behavior modification. It's about using the B.F. Skinner's laws of behavior to shape and teach new behaviors. And it's the best form of communication I have found with any animal. And I myself have used force too, because it's how I was brought up. And B.F. Skinner said that force is the number one form of behavior control today, and he's right. So, and he was on a mission to change the world for it to be a better place for people to better understand how the science of behavior works. But a lot of people don't understand how that works. They don't. Applied behavior analysis is all about understanding reinforcers, punishers, the side effects of using aversives to control behavior. That should be the positive punisher behind why we don't want to use it. Um, people are, I've heard I've heard one time somebody said, oh, yeah, there's all those ABA haters. And I looked at her and I was like, she was an anthropologist. And I said, what do you mean an ABA hater? If people don't understand, how can people not like applied behavior analysis unless they don't understand it? You know, um, because it's based on delivering reinforcers for behaviors, positive reinforcers for behaviors you want to see maintain or increase. I use it all the time on all the people around me. Um, I teach all my volunteers how to use it. We're a very happy group of people to be around, um, because we know how it works.
So
Um,
if we look at behaviorism and what Skinner taught and what you've been talking about, all the different aspects of that, the principles. Let me go back to the question that before we started talking about it. What aspect of how behavior works do people misunderstand the most?
Probably reinforcement.
In what way?
People don't truly understand what a reinforcer is.
So I want you to tell us then, what is a reinforcer?
Okay.
Yeah,
A
because you come
reinforcer,
from a different perspective, all right? And here I'll tell most people, they think reinforcer, they think food reward. That's it. It's full stop.
nope.
Yeah, so that's why. Here we go.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm only using food as a reinforcer, maybe 40%, 45% of my time training. Most people who don't understand applied behavior analysis or positive reinforcement, I'm going to say the number one thing is they do not understand reinforcers and reinforcement. It is always the individual that decides what the reinforcer is. It is not us. So that's why you need to observe and build that list, test them, see is it actually a reinforcer? And that could be temperature, that could be temperature of a substrate, that could be a view of something, could be a reinforcer. Reinforcers are everything. And like I said, it's always the animal that we're training that determines the reinforcer. It is not us, and we don't reinforce an animal. You reinforce behavior. And once you understand that, you will understand if you're looking at a reinforced behavior or not. A reinforcer is something that comes after a behavior that causes the future rate of that behavior to maintain or increase. So if I have a prong collar on a dog and it barks at another dog and I jerk that leash, that is my intended well, if I knew better, I wouldn't do that because I know the side effects of using it. But I'm talking from a standpoint of somebody who may not know. If I have to jerk that leash because the reinforcer behind me jerking the leash is the dog stops the behavior immediately. Does the dog continue the behavior? If the behavior happens again, the behavior is being reinforced. And I have to jerk that leash again. What looking at from applied behavior analysis point of view is okay, now you've just jerked the leash twice. The behavior is still the undesired behavior, the behavior you're trying to change is still happening. You're using force and aversives and pain to change behavior, yet the behavior still exists. Why are you doing this? Once somebody understands reinforcers, reinforcement, that's an example. The jerking the chain is how people using force and aversives to control behavior do not understand reinforcement because that undesired behavior is still happening. What's the reinforcer behind the person jerking the chain? Immediacy. That he got the dog to shut up and stop immediately. But the behavior happened again. So you got it to stop right now. And what the person has to do in the future is what I see happening is more force, more pain, more pressure. So the behavior of the person increasing the pain is being reinforced. The behavior of the dog stopping that behavior is not happening. You're trying, but it's not working. There is reinforcement misunderstood.
And as far as that behavior stopping, we're just looking at suppression, right?
Yeah,
In the moment.
yeah, yeah.
And there's a reinforcer out there for the dog that nobody's addressed.
Yep. And there's another example I give And it's a very scary picture to imagine. And that's the person using the shock collar on the dog to keep the dog away from small children.
Mm.
The dog starts approaching the small child, you zap the dog. You and I know that right now the hair is already standing up on our arms because we know what's we know conditioned reinforcers,
For those
aversive.
that don't, explain what's happening.
Yeah, so what's happening is you're zapping that dog every time it gets near a child, um, and the dog stops immediately. Let's say the dog stops immediately. What's happening is that pain is being paired with proximity of children. You do not, whether you have that shock collar on or off in the future, the dog is learning children, pain, children, pain, children, pain. What's going to happen when that 2-year old comes up and actually gets close enough to touch that dog?
I want the pain. I want that pain to go away.
Yep. Now is my time to make sure this child doesn't get near me again because it is a threat, because I've been taught it is paired with pain.
This is something that where I see the most similar thing is not just with children, but people going for walks who have a dog that's reactive towards a person or another dog. And they're getting that immediate compliance by shocking the dog or giving a jerk on that prong collar. And that outward display of behavior, of reactivity, shuts down temporarily, is suppressed. And all the while, that dog is associating pain with something that it's already uncomfortable with. All right. So now we're stacking triggers on top of what this dog's already anxious, fearful, stressed out about. And there's this belief in the dog training world, especially when it comes to behaviors like aggression and reactivity, that the only way to manage and control that is through the use of punishment, through the use of negative reinforcement, getting the dog doing something else, but under threat of aversive control, or punishing the behavior. And they think that there's no way that positive reinforcement, force-free methods can safely be an alternative to that. And then the narrative is, even though there's no truth behind it, is that force-free trainers would rather euthanize a dog than to give a dog a correction. That's the chorus that's always being echoed in the dog training world from those that are balanced or that use force. Now, you hear that, but again, your most of your work is with exotic animals. From that perspective, from somebody who's very well versed in practices and uses ABA every day across multiple species, and we already know that you deal with aggression. Talk about the realities behind that whole narrative.
Um, I just using force, pain, or fear in the form of negative reinforcement, and negative reinforcement is escape avoidance behavior. I um I just see a hot mess all over that equation in an exotic animal environment. Um I I know we had started off talking about when I will use force and aversives to control behavior. Um, when I see somebody interacting with an animal I'm training, that I am teaching different types of targets and everything to teach this animal to voluntarily move when I ask it to. When I see somebody else come in, and I've seen this with an exotic animal, smack it. No, that's not what we do. I'm like, oh my
Mm.
God. um, and I've been told you can't let this animal get away with this behavior. And I said, you are putting me in a very dangerous position because number one, I've learned not to do this, but what if I walk back in that enclosure and expect, or not in the enclosure, outside and expect this animal to do these things? But now, because you've interacted with it that way, you're putting this animal could be generalizing all people with unpredictability. Sometimes a person interacts with me this way, sometimes a person interacts with me with force. Which one's coming at me? I have no place to go. I'm talking from the animal's point of view. I've got no place to go. So, and people always say that the animal's acting unpredictably. Um, and I always tell people, if you are not sure what's getting ready to happen, if you are nervous this much, do not do it. Because what it means is you don't have enough information about that animal. And you collect information through training the animal. And you be consistent. And with these fearful animals, be very predictable in your steps, in your approaches in the beginning. Um, because that predictability teaches the animal they have control over you. And I want that animal thinking it has, and it does have control over me. You're not comfortable, I'm going to back up. Because if I keep taking steps forward, you and I already know what's likely to happen. Um, I'm going to reinforce all kinds of behaviors I don't want. Then I'm going to have to counter condition. Um, and I'm going to lose all this progress that I've made. But the number one thing is I don't ever want to put the animal in that position. You know, um, I will positively punish the behavior of people interacting with an animal. I will pull out my ABA and I will, hey, why don't we try this approach? And then I try informing the person, let me tell you what's getting ready to happen if you keep approaching the animal in this way, and this is why. This is what science shows. And if they still don't listen, I'm asking myself, why are you doing this? Then I don't mind saying over the radio, hey, get this person. They're no longer allowed in this exhibit at this area. I will positively punish the hell out of that behavior because the effects of not doing so are worse. I'm going to get hurt. Somebody else is going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get killed. Yeah, so I will positively punish behavior of somebody that's not willing to do better by the animal or willing to educate themselves as to why their approaches are going to bring on undesired behaviors.
In the years that you've worked with exotic animals, what fallout, what adverse reactions have you seen when other people have been interacting with these animals in a way that involved negative reinforcement or punishment, whether it be intentional or accidentally?
Um, I've seen people getting hurt.
Can you give an example?
Yeah. I've seen it numerous times. I've seen, and I'm not laughing because somebody's getting
Sure.
hurt. That's not what I'm saying. Um, um, I was working. with this one particular bird, and it was all off contact. I'd walk up, and before I let an animal out of a cage, out of an enclosure, I've already got it trained. I've already got it thought, how am I going to get it back in its enclosure? Because I don't want to bring it out, teach it all this amazing things, and then have to capture it and put it back in its enclosure. So before I get it out of its enclosure, I'm training it everything I'm going to need it to know once I get it out to get it back in. And it's usually a target of some sort. Um, so I was sitting there training this bird. I walk in, I let it out of its enclosure, and I was teaching it all off contact. Never even touched the bird. And I'm cueing it where to go, and I'm cueing it to get closer and closer to me. And somebody walks in and just is sitting there watching me. And I know this person did not believe in positive reinforcement training. Just capture the animal and get it to move. Just capture it, crate it, move it, dump the crate, let the animal out. And this person was standing behind me. And then he's sitting there watching for a while and he goes, "Why don't you just force that bird on your arm?" And I looked at him and I was just like, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to take that choice away from the animal. The animal isn't stepping up for me because it's unsure of what's going to happen next. So I'm trying to reinforce these small approximations towards the bird stepping on my arm. And he walked up and he goes, just watch this." And he takes his coat and he pulls it down like this. And he goes, "Step up." And the bird, I was sitting there going, "Oh my God." And the bird, the feathers kind of raised on its head. And he's like, "Step up." And the bird kind of backed up. And then he's like, "I said, step up." So I see the bird start to lift its foot to step on the arm. And I'm thinking, is this bird just going to step up? But the bird started to step up with one foot and then boom, nailed him. And he's like, "Ah," he goes, "Just capture it, just grab a towel." And I was like, "I'm not doing that. I
Yeah.
don't have to, but you just ruined all the progress that I made with the bird this week."
Yeah.
So, but a lot of times what I have found out too, Will, is even though that's not having control over your environment. And applied behavior analysis is using environmental events to control behavior. So I could rearrange that environment and say, it's not the bird that I need to get control of, it's this person. And I
Mm.
did. I started
Yeah.
getting control. I identified the reinforcers behind that person and I started delivering them for behaviors I wanted to see maintain or increase, which was telling him how awesome he was at the things he was good at
Yeah.
and not telling him, giving him any kind of recognition for interacting with the animals. So I found alternate behaviors to deliver recognition, which was the reinforcer, to replace behavior, which was to keep him in the maintenance area and away from the animals. And it worked.
And you had success.
I did. I did. And I was like, whew, okay. I controlled that part of my environment. So now I can focus on getting this bird. And it didn't take long. I mean, even though it caused a setback in my training, the bird recognized me. The bird recognized the things I was asking of it. So I tried to be predictable with asking it, okay, minus that hurdle, you know me. We know each other through training. And I had the bird. I can't remember. It's been a long time ago, but it ended with the bird on my arm and me taking a selfie of us.
Oh. Now, at most um, zoos that you work with, um, are they pretty much force free?
Yeah. Um, yeah. There's different certifications zoos can get to show that they are doing the best in their quality of care with animals. To get into any particular certified zoo, you have to understand positive reinforcement training and applied behavior analysis. Yeah.
Now, with the zookeepers that are there, do they pretty much though work with force-free management? And the reason I say that, and it could have been just, maybe there are some zoos that really do use it. Maybe it was just somebody that created the picture and it was BS. But I saw a picture of supposedly a zookeeper with a cheetah that had a prong collar on and a leash.
That'd be interesting to see what zoo that was.
I think it was
But
one in Ohio.
oh God. Oh no.
Are you in Ohio?
I just moved from Ohio to Michigan, but
Oh,
I live right on the Ohio-Michigan line.
okay.
Um,
I want to
well,
say Cincinnati, maybe. But again, it
well,
could have been a
maybe
fake.
that's an old photo.
Sure.
Maybe that's an old photo because I just can't see that zoo doing that. And it also depends, Will. There's different kinds of certifications different zoos can get, and you don't even need one. I mean, you can start your own zoo and not have, depending on what state you're in,
Sure.
not have any type of certification, so you can do whatever you want to do. But with zoos, you are being licensed by USDA, and depending on the education of your inspector, they will come in and they'll say, show me the type of training you're doing. And if you're not doing it, you're busted. You just lied to them, you know? You have to show
I'm
them.
interested in that. So the United States Department of Agriculture gets in on training issues at the zoo?
I'm not going to say some of them know a little bit about it. Some of them may be educated about it. Some of them may not know anything. But if part of your enrichment, because you have to, if they ask for your enrichment schedule for this particular species of animal, you have to show it. And with USDA, I've had them in my building and I welcomed them in my building. This was prior to birds being regulated, which just happened 2 years ago. Um, they loved my enrichment schedule and my enrichment calendar, and they asked if they cared if they shared it with other zoos. I said, take it.
Beautiful.
So if they ask you for your enrichment schedule, your enrichment calendar, you have to show it to them. If you have training on there as one form of enrichment, because I do put down training as a form of enrichment because I know it is. And they do too, based on what I show them. And if you have down there that scale training or crate training was a form of enrichment today, they're going to say, well, it depends on the inspector, but they can say, show me your crate training. And if you don't have it down, you just lied to a USDA inspector.
Gotcha.
And they're not going to look at you too kindly because of that. So with any enrichment team or training team I'm working with, I'm like, you mark that down. You better show me that you know that the animal knows exactly what you're talking about.
What is the most common behavior problems? And I'm thinking, and the reason I paused there because I'm thinking to myself, gosh, would you be labeling things differently in the zoo versus how I might be labeling them here? But let me just get to the question. So what is the most common behavioral issues, problems that you see amongst, species that are in zoos? And are there some that are more species Are certain behaviors more prone to a certain species than another?
Okay, I think one of the most common forms of behavior concerns that I see is boredom. Maybe you got to know the individual animal, you've got to understand the species. Um, Boredom, lack of enrichment. I mean, that's probably the most common thing I see. I'm going to tell you that is the most
Yeah,
common thing
and
I see.
how is that typically displayed? And is it pretty uniform across the board with different species, or is it displayed differently amongst different species in your experience?
Um, yeah, I will look at enrichment for a particular animal. First thing I'm going to think of, I was going to say the first thing I'm thinking of is their species, but it's not. I'm looking at the individual, but if I walk up and I don't know the individual, then I will think of the species. Is the animal over grooming, sleeping extremely long, unnormal periods of time? Is it licking cage bars? Is it eating inedible objects? Is it resource guarding? Is it an extreme resource guarder? Um, those are all things I'm looking at. Did I say over grooming, over preening?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Abnormal repetitive behaviors due to lack of enrichment. Um, I'm not going to tell you I can think of all these places that I know of where I can say those animals are living their best life.
Yeah.
I wish it was a lot, but um, you know, under enrichment, I'd say most animals are under enriched, you know?
You mentioned resource guarding, and you said extreme resource guarding as well. Um, and is that pretty common in the exotic animals that you work with as one of the bigger behavior concerns?
No,
Okay.
I'm not going to say it's an extreme behavior.
Right.
It's a huge red flag. This has caution blinking all over it. I wouldn't say it's one of the most common behavior concerns I see, but when I hear an animal is a resource guarder, if somebody tells me that, I'm going to be on alert. Um, but a lot of people, I'm getting not lying, a lot of people don't even know what it looks like. You know, they don't even know that's what they're dealing with.
Now, have you worked with a large, powerful exotic animal that had a resource guarding problem and worked with modifying that behavior?
Um, yeah,
Can you give me an example of what you did and was it successful and how did you measure success for that?
yeah, yes. I'm thinking of two particular ones, and they're both primates. Um, um, Resource guarders. And I have a whole presentation on this one particular one, showing baseline, and you never wanted to make sure you were within reach of this animal because it was a strong, powerful animal. And if it could get a hold of you, if it thought it resource guarded everything inside of its enclosure and everything it could reach outside of its enclosure. So if you were to even walk by within proximity, out of touch, and you bent over and picked up a rock, that primate was going to grunt, shake the bars, show you his teeth, flash his eyes, and let you know that's mine. Do not pick anything next to this enclosure. So I started working with this animal and off contact, and I would teach him. I'm trying to think of where I started with him. I would teach him the end result. Oh, I started with, okay, is it a rock? Is it a stick? What is it in particular that's causing you to do all these behaviors I just explained? So it happens when I pick up a rock 2 feet outside your enclosure. Does it happen at 5 feet? No. Good. So that's where I'll start. And I started picking up rocks, showing it to the animal, bridging, putting it back down right where I found it, which is ended up being one of the reinforcers, talking about being able to identify reinforcers. With the resource guarder, the last thing I want to do is remove something that it's resource guarding, because I'm likely to reinforce that behavior. So I picked up the rock, bridge. I told him good, because he just looked at me, and that's the behavior I'm looking for. Any calm behavior, I'll take it. So I showed him I'm putting this rock right back where I took it from. And then I delivered the reinforcer from a distance. So I'm throwing something of value to him. And it could have been a treat. It could have been a plant, browse, leaves, because this animal liked to smell things. So I would throw things that it could smell. And then I started doing that at 4 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet. Now I'm getting within reach of the animal. So what I started doing before I bend down and pick up that rock within grabbing distance of him, I would throw an object inside of his enclosure. So I'm giving him things. I'm giving things for him to interact with. And he would go over, smell it, and he would grunt, and then he would hold it, and he would just hold it with him. So I was like, all right, that has value to him. So then I started picking up, if I could touch a rock, and if he grunted, I stopped touching the rock and I would go back to 3 feet. But when I could touch the rock at arm's distance, boom, there's the 4 main factors of reinforcer effectiveness. Several of them. Deprivation, which means you don't have access to these reinforcers unless the only time you have access to these reinforcers are when I'm giving them to you. Immediacy, boom, it happens immediately. It's immediately, yeah. Size, it happens in large amounts. Contingency, it happens when you let me touch this rock. If I touch this rock, boom, then you get a branch, or 10 Cheerios, whatever you want. It's always the animal that does this. So he started learning, and he's experimenting with his environment. If I just look at her, I don't know what's going through his head. I'm just reading his behavior. I touch the rock again. I'm not picking it up because now I'm 2 feet, not 3 feet. At 3 feet, I would pick it up and put it back down. At 2 feet, I'm just touching it because I've moved my body. I've moved my proximity. I am training a whole new behavior at 2 feet than I am from 3 feet. And this is an example where a lot of people clump behaviors. Whenever you put your body or have to move your body in any new position or request that of the animal, you are training a whole new behavior. And when people don't understand that, they don't understand that they're taking too big of steps. And I always tell people ask me all the time, what is the biggest mistake trainers make? And I say, taking too big of steps in their shaping progress, in their shaping plans, in their training plans, taking way too big of steps. So that's why I'm saying That's a whole new behavior. At 3 feet, I'm picking up a rock and putting it down. That is a completely different behavior than standing at 2 feet, period. And I'm not picking up the rock. I'm just touching it. I don't dare pick up that rock because just because he understood it at 3 feet doesn't mean he's going to understand it at 2. Now he can reach out to me and grab me. So all I'm doing is touching, but I'm increasing the amount of the reinforcer in the beginning while I'm shaping because I'm teaching contingency. You let me do this, boom, this fall from the sky for you. And then I pick up the rock and he's watching, he's looking, and I pick it up 1 inch off the ground and I bridge right there. Mark. I just use the word good when I'm working with an animal that can see and hear. Um, so I pick it up 1 inch, good, place it back down, boom, deliver reinforcer. And then I start shaping from there. And then I get to the point where am I squatting or am I standing when I'm picking up that rock? In the beginning, I was squatting. So now I'm bending over, picking up the rock, showing it to him, bridge, bend over, set the rock back down, deliver the reinforcer. Then I got to the point, Will, this was cool. I remember giving this presentation and I started crying because it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I pick up the rock, I hand it to him. Now, there's a series of steps I've had to take, but I don't think we have enough time to talk about.
Sure.
So I'm just speeding up the process. So I hand the rock to him, and then I taught him, hand it back to me, put it in my hand, and I will set it right back down here. We got beyond that point. Then I started teaching him to clean his own enclosure. Go get your blanket, bring it to me. Feed it to the fence. Um, Go get that whatever that something somebody threw in your enclosure. Go get it, bring it to me. Good. And I taught him I taught this serious resource guarder to give me all these things in his enclosure. We had a really good relationship.
Wow. That is just amazing. So inspiring. As you're telling this, I'm thinking to myself, and I've been inspired previously, and that was a big part of what allowed me to cross over from using aversives to being force free was these inspirational moments of seeing work being done force free that previously I thought could only be done with the use of aversives. And then, later down the road, finding out, it's not just about being nicer, but really the harms and the long-term harms that can happen through the use of aversives. And as we've been talking, and right before that, you mentioned, the biggest mistake that you see trainers make are taking two biggest steps forward in the shaping process. And I was thinking to myself, is that why a lot of people don't cross over? Is that why they give up? Is it that they're too impatient with positive reinforcement and force-free methods and saying, this doesn't work? Is it that they've never seen it work or been inspired by somebody else? But I don't think once you experience it this way, you can't look back. When you can see what can be done. And why I really love the fact that you agreed to come on the podcast is because I've never had somebody on that their primary learner was exotic animals, which, just reinforces more how all this use of punishment, negative reinforcement, aversives, how unnecessary it is.
Yeah.
How unnecessary it is. And that mindset that is still out there that believes that it's so necessary. And it's not. And what better proof than talking about this primate that had this really severe resource guarding, and not only were you able to modify that out of this animal, but then the animal's giving you all of its resources.
Yeah. Just to see that level of trust. You know what I mean? And I'll tell you when before I started training that animal, because I was asked to train him and I was like, I want to train him, you know. I just and they're like, why? And I was like, because he's mean. You know,
Uh,
I don't have control over his environment. He's mean, but we don't learn from easy. We
no.
learn from our biggest challenges. He was one of my best teachers. And once I started learning from him, I think he started being able to understand antecedent behavior consequence when I would get this big smile on my face. You know, I could see him reacting to it. But be careful. Don't forget they are not human beings, because sometimes I'd be like, "You did it," and it would scare him and he'd like, I need to shake the cape art. And I was like, all right, I gotta calm down.
Yeah.
um so but that relationship him and I had skyrocketed,
Wow.
just skyrocketed. Um, so he was a great teacher.
What a great story. And I think with that, I'm going to kind of wrap things up here. But before I do, there's a couple things. What would you what would you tell dog trainers that are balanced? They use positive reinforcement to the best of their knowledge and abilities. They believe that they are humanely using aversives, and they really truly believe that they're doing what's best by the dog. They're not believing that they want to harm dogs in any way, shape, or form. What would you, and maybe they're thinking about crossing over. Maybe they're hearing more and more of these stories about and case examples where positive reinforcement, force free, just did amazing things. And now, not just with dogs, but hearing it about other animals. What would you say to them?
I would say to them, you think your relationship with these dogs is great now? It can get a lot better. And I'm not saying this to sway them. I want them to understand it, because I used to use, it was just with my own dogs, but I used to use force. And I'm like, if I only knew then what I know now. You think your relationship is great now? It can get a lot better. Don't ever stop trying to learn. If I did, the animal that's in the other room would be euthanized today. And I still don't stop trying to learn, because I'm in this for this amazing relationship with these animals. And I want that to increase. So that's what I would tell people that are balance trainers. You think it's good now, it gets great. When we know better, we do better. And there's something else I was just going to say, but I forgot it.
Well, you said something amazing here, because a little while back, I talked about the narrative that we hear from balanced trainers, and it's usually about an aggressive animal, in this case, a dog, right? And they'll say, well, force-free trainers would rather euthanize a dog than give a correction. And in your situation with Rocky, all right, Rocky was going to be euthanized, and you didn't use a correction. You used force-free positive reinforcement methods as a result to prevent Rocky from being euthanized. And with that being said, you weren't the first person that had taken Rocky on, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And I'm assuming others before you probably tried punishment with Rocky.
I'm assuming so.
Yeah. And that didn't get rid of the aggressive behavior.
Yeah.
Maybe in the moment, it
Yeah.
suppressed temporarily.
Well, what it got Rocky is somebody moved out of the house and they left Rocky in the cage and didn't tell anybody in the house.
Hmm.
And it was either the realtor that came in and saw this bird in a cage. So that that person probably reinforced all kinds of undesired behaviors, didn't know how to change it, and that's where it got rocky.
Yeah. But that's a great story, that success story with Rocky, the great story that you shared about the primate with the resource guarding. Just fantastic. I'm so
Thank
glad
you.
that you agreed to come on. Just a great uh, inspirational show as far as what the power of force-free positive reinforcement can do, and not just with dogs but with all animals. How can, if people want to learn more about you, if they want to learn more about your work or even get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Sure. I'm on social media. And people can go to my website, theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. You can email me, Lara, Lara, at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. I live stream every Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern called Coffee with the Critters. It's a free live stream. I just pick a topic and I live stream about it, and I have been doing that for 10 years. Um, and I was going to ask you if you want to be a guest on my show. Um,
Yeah, anytime. I don't know what I can offer your listeners. Now, I didn't know that you had a live streams, but now I want to check that out because there's a lot to learn from you.
I have a lot of live streams. We just turned Coffee with the Critters into a podcast, so it's on Spotify, Apple, everywhere you find you listen to your podcast. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. Trying to get into TikTok.
Yeah, I have not made that jump. I'm still stuck in Facebook and screaming that I'm even there. But
Yeah, yeah. So that's how people can find me.
fantastic. Yeah, be sure to check out. I'm going to be checking out your live stream and your podcast. What was the name of it again?
It's called Coffee with the Critters.
Coffee with the Critters. And give out your web address one more time.
Sure, it's theanimalbehaviorcenter.com.
Perfect. Well, Lara, thank you so much. So enlightening and so informative and inspirational. Just and God bless you for the work that you're doing with the animals that you're doing. You are a breath of fresh air. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Thanks, Lara.
All right.